Hi everyone, let me introduce you to Kim Collins, a good friend of mine. Kim, just introduce yourself and tell us about your experience with grids and everything else.
Okay. So I started agility in about 1996. I've had 12 of my own agility dogs over the years. I, I've been around. I've done a few things in agility. I've seen some FCI stuff. I coached the team in 2010, 2011. So I got to see a lot of really good dogs there. Been to WAO, been to IFCS. With my own dogs. And so I'm always obsessed about watching jumping when I go to those big events. And so it's been a lot of years of watching dogs and dogs and dogs and dogs. We'll get into how much of that we do. So it's not like I haven't seen quite a bit of dogs doing their jump work.
Yeah,
been around for quite a while.
And it's so important. I think the actual experience you've had, I think, counts for so much. It's just watching dogs jumping and jumping and jumping, and doing grids for as long as you've been doing them. I think is just gives you so much knowledge on them rather than just jumping in, reading a book, and going for it. You've just got the knowledge from the experience more than anything.
I really enjoy it. I like the jumping. I like, maybe sometimes people think I'm too detailed, but I just think it's super fascinating that you can change how the dog takes off and, how it handles different sequences just by looking at their jumping, right?
I think it's better to be too detailed than not detailed enough, in my opinion. So I think what you do is great, which is why I've asked you to do this chat, because I think we'll get a lot of good information. So we've got a load of questions here that I think people are asking. I think that you put in some as well that you thought would be useful for people. So we'll start with the first one. Grid work for warm up, which are best? That's what someone's asked. I think that's a good starting question.
So I always, in class, obviously we always use set point, and I always use my set point at my warm-up jumps at trials. It's easy to set up. You know how far back your dog needs to sit, and then they just get a nice set point. And I like that for warm-up at trials so that the dog knows what surface they're working on. So if you train on grass or you don't train on grass, you only train on dirt, or you only train on turf, and now you're going to run on grass, I think it's important for the dogs to do their set point on the surface that they're going to be running on. We did have an event at Nationals on this weird soccer turf, and Fenn did his warm-up jump and landed on his chin. And I thought, oh my God. And then he never landed on his chin again. He was like, oh, that's what I'm jumping on. And he was fine. But a ton of dogs at that event were sliding on their face to the point where our orthopedic surgeon lives in that town was taking pictures. And he literally said, oh, I have so much work next week because so many dogs are crashing and landing and slipping and sliding. He said, I'm going to be so busy next week. And I was like, yeah, but mine did his set point and went, oh, that's not good, and fixed it on one jump.
Because of the experience on the set point and everything, it just makes he understands it so well, doesn't he? That he was like, okay, that's what I need to do. And that's what I like about your dogs, is it's very obvious when I watch them run that they know their job with the jump. Like, they understand where to put their strides in, where to take off from, the shape to make. They all have really good skills on jumping skills. I've always noticed that with your dogs, and that is, from the grid work you do. And I think it's so important they understand that, and something I want to get into a lot more, which is why I've started it a lot more now.
And I got you to buy on-wing jumps.
Absolutely. I've won and bought away. I'll get into it. I get right into it. The problem with UK is we don't have warm-up jumps at competitions. Obviously, at a show, training, we can all start off with some set points and everything, but at a show, we don't have that. So unless you're sneaky and put one in your garden like I do. But you can at UKA, but not at KC shows. I'm hoping it's something they might start bringing in, or more people might start bringing in. But at the moment, we're not actually allowed it, which is a shame, because I do think it gets the dogs, like you say, just warmed up and looking for where they're taking off and looking for how to jump. So hopefully.
Yeah, and it's so important that if you're training on it, if you're going to run a trial on a different surface that you train on, I don't think it's fair that a show doesn't allow you at least one warm-up jump for people to warm their dogs up on. That's what they're going to do all day for 2 days, is jump. Like, it seems silly to not have the ability to warm them up on that.
I totally agree with you, but Kennel Club is very old-fashioned and disagree. But we did have one at the show. I was at this weekend, it's a Kennel Club show, and she's a really great lady, and she organised it, and she did have warm-up jumps. I think it's so much better for them. So definitely, hopefully, fingers crossed, that's going to start being the norm.
Cool.
So good. So set point for warm up. I agree with that too.
Yep. And the compression grid in class, we use the compression, especially if if we're doing handling and the dogs seem to be flinging themselves around. It's good to just go back and either do a quick set point or do a quick compression grid just to remind them, hey, you don't have to hurl yourself. You can sit back and relax. You don't have to be flinging yourself around. Then go back to the handling sequence. And often the handling sequence is better when you sort of remind them, hey, get back on your rear.
So would you say like set point and the compression grids are like almost like your bread and butter of grids? You're like your real foundation ones that you like?
Yeah, set point, compression, and the bend. Those three I do forever.
Yeah, always, all the way through their lives. No, well, they're the ones I've been working through on the course. So definitely, I think I've already noticed the difference with Susan's jumping, just doing those. And I still haven't put them in the sequence yet. It's next on my list of jobs of grids to do. I'm looking forward to it. This week's coming.
Yeah.
Best online classes and books. I'll big up your class so you don't have to. I think Kim's class is a brilliant online class to be doing. But books wise, what would you say?
For me, the most I learned was go find a jumping gymnastics grid work book for horses. So the horse people have been doing jumping grids since the early 30s. And really, when you think about it, the consequences of bad jumping on a horse is disastrous for horse and rider. So I think the horse people have totally mastered the art of jumping. Now, obviously, for dogs, we have different angles and approaches, and they have to be way more versed in different takeoff spots. But those horse people, they know what they're doing. And I mean, sometimes some people in my grid classes will say, God, you made me move it like 1 inch and it made all the difference. And the horse people will say 2 inches on a horse jumping grid can make all the difference to a horse. So I've learned the most, I think with the grid work we started, Susan Salo did a brilliant job of introducing that sort of horse jumping grid work to us, but then it kind of fell off and it didn't really go anywhere with agility. So I kind of had to go my own way and try to figure out, okay, how do I put this and translate this into actual agility? So I just started picking up horse jumping books and reading about the gymnastics exercises for horses. It is so similar. And, they do bounce grids with their horses. They don't have bounce grids in their actual courses because people always say, well, the jumps are so low and they're bouncing and they're never going to do that in agility. It's teaching a specific element of jumping, and the horses do bounce grids, right? They do those, although they'll never do them in an actual competition. It's an exercise in a specific part of their jumping, and it's super important. So I've learned the most personally from the horse gymnastics books.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, I used to be into horses and I know how much grid work they did. And it is so different. And it's so similar, but also different because obviously if you're riding a horse, you can help to control the takeoff. With a dog, it has a harder job because they have to learn completely for themselves where they're taking off and at more speed as well. So, I think it's more important that we do grids with the dogs than horses. And,
Yeah, for sure. You can control those takeoffs with the horses, but yeah, you can't ride your dog, but it's kind of the same thing. Like we're just trying to teach them how to do it on their own so we can trot along the side.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think that's something I hear a lot in the UK is people going, well, it's not, it's not what they're doing. They're bouncing on small jumps. Why on earth are we doing that? But that's what, like you said, it's a certain element of the jump. It's not just teaching a dog to jump. There's loads of different elements incorporated in the actual jump, isn't there? Which is what's so important. You're teaching certain different elements with the different grids. So I think that's a good point to bring up, definitely.
Yeah, and hopefully in whatever grid work class or jump work class people take, hopefully things are being explained to them about, okay, we're doing this grid and this is the reason and this is how it translates, right? So kind of like the video I did for you with the bended grid where I said, okay, this is what I'm looking for and this is how it translates to agility, right? Later.
No, definitely. I think it's so important. So good, excellent. Next question. Are the best grids to teach dogs not to flatten over jumps? Obviously, lots of people want to do grids more than anything, I think, because they think it's going to teach their dogs to not knock bars. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think flattening it's a combination of things, right? It's weight shift. It's can they read distance properly? It's do they understand where their takeoff is so that they're making the correct arcs? Their angle of elevation is correct. So is that correct? Can they handle the height you're asking them to do? I don't know. You have to check that. And a lot of times it's over arousal. So there's sort of 6 things going on. So there's not, you can't say there's 1 grid or 2 grids that do that. You need to address all those things and figure out, okay, why is your dog having that problem? If it's arousal, then you're probably having problems in other places too, like weed pull entries, not holding stopped contacts, coming off early on contacts, start lines. So over arousal bleeds into everything, as well as the jumping. So if you are having flattening because of arousal, are you having those other issues too? So those are things that maybe arousal you have to look at away from the jumping and see what you've got going on there. I don't know there if you've ever heard of the Yerkes-Dodson law of arousal. So that is basically a law that says that arousal is good for performance to a point, but once arousal goes over the top, then performance deteriorates. And I think that happens in agility all the time. We want our dogs really high and really fast and really aroused, but sometimes I think people take that too far, and then the dog is so aroused it can't think and it starts to make mistakes. And when mistakes happen, in my opinion, that's when injuries happen. So I want my dogs to run as fast as they can run with me. I mean, I'm always there, you know, handicap, but go as fast as you can, but you need to stay safe and you need to jump clean. You can't just be an idiot and smash through things. Like I don't like that personally for my dogs. So I think arousal is important, but to a point, and sometimes the flattening of the jumping, you know, if it's that, then you have to think about that. But the grids do help with that because they can't be sloppy and over aroused in a lot of the grid work. Like you're going to find on the next lesson you're doing, when you start to combine things, the dogs get higher because, oh, we got more stuff, more things. But then sometimes they forget about their feet. And so that's what this next lesson for you is can she put all the things together one after the other with you running, right? So, and we're doing those low. Those grids don't have hardly any height to them, but there's a lot of different footwork and a lot of different ways for her to use her body in those, you know, those grids that we're going to put in a pattern there. So they can't be, if you do grid work, they can't run over aroused. They have to be thoughtful because the puzzles are too hard, right? They have to concentrate. But if you never did any grid work and you just went straight to coursework with a really fast dog, I can totally see how flattening over the bars would be a problem. Go back and work your weight shift. Can they read those distances quickly so they rock back? Do they know where to take off? So like we were working on jump arc. Do they actually pick a correct jump arc? If they don't, then they're going to land on the jumps. So, you know, there's lots of little things going on in there, I think.
I think that's such a really good point because the over arousal is such an interesting thing. Because me and Dan are quite well known for making dogs quite crazy, and we do build. One of our talks I'm going to do is about over arousal because we do make our dogs crazy. But on the whole, I think most of our dogs, there's a point that we know that there's arousal level is high enough that we can't push it any more than that. But that's being a dog trainer, isn't it? And understanding that. Because obviously they go past a certain point and it just goes crazy, and we've really struggled with that with our latest dogs, Commotion and Boffin, because they were always crazy, and I think we then added crazy as well, which we didn't realize they were going to be as crazy as they are, and it did push them over threshold, and we have struggled with them not being thoughtful because they do just like to run and crash. And then with a lack of grids as well, we never really had that with Commotion, with Boffin, with Geek and Fame. They understood themselves not to go past that point. Every dog is so different. Like I do believe grids for some dogs are really necessary, and I wish I'd done them a lot earlier with Commotion. I think Susan would be able to deal anyway, but they're going to help her massively. But she's the kind of dog, I think she's picking it up very quickly and going thoughtful. She's actually, you can see straight away she's thinking about it and being thoughtful and being careful. I can see the change in her after just a few weeks. But Commotion, I think when he's, I'll talk about this in a minute, but when he's not injured, I think will be much harder to really get him to understand, to be thoughtful and not to launch and crash, because he does just want to crash through everything. So that arousal point is very important, and it's knowing your dogs, isn't it? And being able to read your dogs to a level and know where not to push them over. I think that's so important.
I think that a lot of the dogs are being bred today higher. I mean, we are breeding high to high because we want that fastest dog. So people are looking for the highest puppy and whatever, which is fine. But you also have to be a good dog trainer so that you understand, you know, like you said, okay, well, this puppy's already high. I probably don't need to jack this puppy up anymore. I need to put some thoughtfulness in there. So I do think that the dog training comes in there. Most animal trainers will tell you that when you want to increase the speed of a behavior, so if you've trained a behavior and then you want it faster, at some point you will lose accuracy. So if the precision and accuracy falls off, the faster you want them to do those behaviors. So you got to have a balance on how fast it is fast, right?
Well, so you'll want the fastest, but there is a fine line between, you know, when you go too fast, there is going to be a decrease in accuracy. Of course, you get the odd dog that can do it and they can put the two together and go flat out fast and be accurate. But on the whole, everyone wants the speed, but then you do get that decrease in accuracy. And that's where the line comes in. I mean, do you think some dogs that are already quite thoughtful and low, do you think grids could possibly make them more too thoughtful? Do you think that can happen?
No, I think it works in the opposite way, which is kind of weird. So dogs that, like when we're working that compression grid, dogs that don't have any power actually build power because it actually works that rear end and gives them more strength. Yeah. But I just think overall confidence is what makes dogs run faster. If they are confident in their job and they're like, I got this, I know this, I think all it does is make them better. And a fast dog will just get better and more accurate. And a slower dog will just get more confident. I mean, each dog has its own ground speed, right? So based on structure and temperament and whatever. So some dogs, you're only going to get so much out of them, and that's all that physically they can give you. But, you know, all things being equal, if you have a fast dog and a good structured dog and they can give you that power and they're confident and they're accurate, well, that's obviously our best combination. But a dog that's a bit more sensitive, I think can totally learn to be more confident and power through things a bit more as far as their structure and their temperament will allow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. It's like knowing what's best for that dog. And like, that's what a lot of people say is, well, my dog can jump, doesn't have poles down, I don't need to do grid work. And I think a lot of people would think that would say that, and that's why they wouldn't bother doing it. But like you say, it's all about confidence. Confidence gives you speed. So if they understand their job better, surely they will want to go faster.
Yeah, and the people I've actually watched a couple of videos lately. Somebody's been posting videos of different trials or whatever, and they posted a video of their dog's clean run, but the dog is taking off early everywhere and over jumping. Yeah. So does that make that dog a good jumper just because it went through a round clean, right? Like, I think that you really, if you're going to look, you need to slow-mo your videos. You need to watch your coursework. Is the dog centered over the bar? Are they picking appropriate takeoff spots? Are they over jumping? Are they launching on their turns? I mean, you can have a dog that jumps clean, but jumps 6 inches higher than every jump, right? That's not efficient, right? And that's not educated, right? That's heroic. That's what we call it. You have a heroic jumper or an educated jumper.
Absolutely. I think the more dogs I'm watching now, I've got into it a bit more, and I'm watching because of Modo's early takeoff. I'm watching more dogs. I think most fast dogs are taking off too early. I think especially the big powerful boys, they take off early, they land short. And I think a lot of people are breeding for that because we want that big powerful stride. And so they think because they're doing that big jump, even though they're landing short, they're saying that's good, because I honestly think that's what people they'd like to see. But the centering over the jump, I don't think it's happening very often at all, unless you get those real natural jumpers that just seem to be able to figure out their striding quite well on their own. So I don't think a lot of people, like I would say probably less than 50% of what I would class the top handlers in the world would be doing grid work to the extent I now believe it should be done. But they're still getting around it, and they're still winning because they think they don't need to. But like you say, surely they could be better if they understand how to jump better. But,
well, and I also think it's injury prevention, right? Like dogs can run injured in agility and you won't know because it's just momentum, right? It's going to get them through. So do they want to stay sound? Do we want them taking off early like that and hitting a bar or hitting wings? Dogs don't like to do that, and that's where injury happens. So my goal with grid work is always first and foremost longevity in their career. Like I want them to be sound. I don't want them crashing jumps ever.
Well, that's why I started with you, wasn't it? Modo's always been a bit of an early takeoff, but he was ridiculous one day and took off so early, crashed a jump. And I don't think he's been right since. That's why I started with you, because I said I've got to sort this early takeoff out. But it's actually doing the grids has made me has brought up an issue that I think he actually had, that I thought was early takeoff, which he does have, but also the fact that I think he's in pain somewhere now as well. So I think the grids were definitely showing me that he couldn't, and like you said straight away, has he got a problem? And I was like, well, I can't find one. No one can find one. He's not lame. But you said instantly, is there a problem in his back? And I do think he's now a bit sore somewhere, which is why I'm getting him all checked out. And he's on a rest. But so I think that it was great for the grids to really show me that he was trying to tell me there was something wrong. But like you said, when he was running fast with momentum, he wasn't actually looking that bad, only the odd jump. So yeah, I think they were brilliant for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's, they can't really fake it mechanically. I don't think in the grids, that's where that stuff's going to show up right away. And good, that's good. Like if it shows up super tiny, really early, well, we can get on it and we can fix that. It's when you don't do any of that stuff and you just let them keep doing agility, and then there's all of a sudden a catastrophe with, oh my God, now the CCL is gone, or the, whatever. Let's catch it early and then let's fix it, right?
I think a lot of dogs run injured, and people don't realize. I'm really, I know when my dog's jumping bad, which is what I thought it was more the not understanding of how to jump rather than injury. I think it's obviously a combination of both, but lots of people don't see it. The amount of dogs I go to a competition, I see jumping, I think, oh my God, I wouldn't be jumping that dog, and and the grids would 100%. So they think it's because the dogs just do it. That's what they say. Oh, they just jump like that. Well, should they just jump like that? Is there an issue? Do they just not understand how to jump? So definitely, I think it's a really good way of picking up flaws or injuries and when to fix it.
Yeah.
Good.
Perfect.
So question 4, what grids are recommended for extension 2 collection?
Yeah, I think today in agility, everybody's like trying to teach good collection.
Yeah.
The problem, I think people have a misconception that dogs go from full extension to full collection. And in reality, they don't do that. There is something in between that called what I call compression. So that's like, the compression grid. It's all about, if you're driving 100 kilometers an hour and you have to go into a hairpin turn, you don't go 100 kilometers an hour and then pound on the brakes and make that hairpin turn. You are going off the cliff if you try to do that. But I think that's what people expect from their dogs. They're like, well, don't let them out of stride until the last second. Well, it's not fair. It's not mechanically fair. It's not mechanically how dogs work. They will come from extension. They will go through compression where they shorten up their body in preparation for collection. So in my opinion, all the collection happens about 6 to 10 feet before, the dog gets ready for that collection about 6 to 10 feet before the jump they're going to turn on. And if you ignore that part, then they're going to have troubles getting their bodies organized for that really nice, tight, close takeoff that's nice and rounded and soft, right? Good collection to me is super soft, super light, and super tight to the jump. That's dependent on shoulder structure. Obviously, we can get to that later. So I really think that you really need to go through your foundation grids because they address compression, right? You know that. We've been, they can do a foundation grid and not be compressed, right? People set those grids too wide and the dogs never learn that, hey, you can actually compress your body, keep the same amount of strides, but just compress your body, and then it helps the body to get organized for the next jumping task. So if you don't teach your dogs how to move from extension through compression to get ready for whatever kind of collection you want, because there's different kinds of collection, then they're never going to collect properly. Plus, there's things like we talked about, do they understand how to center themselves over a bar? If they don't know that they're supposed to be having that bar underneath them, regardless of whether they're jumping an extension or collection, then that's a problem too. So there isn't one grid. I do use my grids to teach collection, and I use my grids to really get the dogs to understand what collection is. I do think people struggle with true collection. Like, what does it look like? And what does it look like on their dog? And lots of people don't know. Lots of people, they get this little hybrid step and they're like, well, was that collected or was it not collected? Or the dog comes in and they take off from 6 feet back and they land close to the wing. And they're like, well, look, they landed close to the wing, so that must be collection. And I'm like, yeah, there was no collected stride in there. No. So I think it's tough. People have to learn, what does collection look like on your dog? And yes, for sure, there are grids to help that. But also there's pieces, right? There's, how do you go from extension to compression? Can you go from compression to collection? Do you know what collection looks like? How close can your dog get to a bar, right? There's a whole bunch of things that happen in there with collection.
Oh yeah, it's not, that is definitely, people don't understand it, and that's why it's so important to do these courses, to really get an understanding. And like you say, every dog moves differently. You've got to know what your dog is capable of, because that's what I've always struggled with commotion more than anything, is the fact he just wants to take off for everything miles away. Like, it's not just jumps. He wants to launch at the sofa, he wants to launch into the van. He just loves leaping at stuff, which is why I think the grids I should have done so many more earlier to understand how to compress him. And I did do grids, but not to the extent I never would have put them as close together as you're making me put them with him, because he was always on his forehand, always looked like he was falling through them, because he wasn't actually understanding how to collect his body and compress his body to actually lift for the jump properly. And it's taking you helping me, and even though I know he's out on a break now, but he was actually starting to get his compression grid quite nicely, wasn't he? And just from a few different things we did, just changing it around a few inches here and there, toying a few different places, and him just starting to understand, oh, that's what you want me to do. So yeah, I think so good, that compression extension grid, the compression grid, sorry, is so useful for dogs like him, to teach them just to back off a little bit. But also, when I'm looking forward to when I'm getting back to being able to do it, speak with me running as well.
Yeah, for sure.
He goes, as soon as I put in motion, he's just like, oh my God, I've got to do everything a billion miles an hour. Which, partly my foundation, because that's what I taught him, but also he is just that. The whole litter that's one of the reasons we didn't breed them again, because they are just mental, like really crazy. They can't control themselves almost. That's why I changed stud dog for the second time. So I think it's so important to look at that and look at what you're breeding, because yeah, we want the speed, but they also have to have jumping skills. I don't think the whole litter, none of them are particularly natural jumpers. Some dogs just get it, don't they? Some dogs do just understand and just have a very natural jump. Fame always did, but other dogs just don't really understand how to use their bodies like that. They just want to go fast everywhere, because that's what we do a lot of.
Yeah, well, that's why it's important. Like, I start my dogs quite young, because I don't know if I'm going to have a jumping issue, right? Like, I'm going to assume that I'm going to have a jumping issue. So I might as well just teach it correctly from the start.
Yeah.
But looking back now, if you knew then what you knew now, I mean, having that drive in that litter is great. Mm-hmm. But maybe if their introduction to jumping was different, you would have had the drive and nice jump.
Absolutely. Right? And I wish, God, do I wish I'd go back in time and to redo it all. But, I'm playing catch up now, which will probably, grids, that's what people think now. Oh, I'll do grids, that'll fix everything. Well, I don't, because I'm not expecting it to fix everything. He's 4 years old, he's patterned how he jumps, but I just want to give him more understanding of how to use his body a little bit better, which is, it's not magic. People think, oh, I'll do a couple of grids, that's it, my dog's learn how to jump now. Unfortunately, that's not the case, as with most dog training. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, and you're not going to change things that have been set in there for years massively.
I mean, it's the same as like a running A-frame. If you've been teaching a running A-frame with them missing the contact for 3 years, and then somebody comes to you and says, Dave, fix my running A-frame, you may or may not be able to fix that in an arousal situation, because it becomes a fixed action pattern that the dog just has, and it's really hard to break.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about, actually. So in this country, and I think, to be honest, in most European countries especially, everyone corrects bars. So if their dog has a bar, they stop, and I've been doing it too, so I'm not saying other people, it's me as well. Stop, pick the pole up, there's no bollocking, there's no telling off, but it's stop, pick the pole up, make them do a jump, little praise, then repeat. And now we see it, and how Europeans, I would say most Europeans see it, not saying everyone, is if the dog doesn't stop on a contact, or misses a contact, or comes off before release, you would correct that. So why wouldn't you correct a bar when it falls down? So I know you don't. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, because it's really tough, because when that bar comes down, the problem actually happened probably 1 to 2 strides before. Yeah. So then you're trying to correct the outcome of the problem. You're not actually helping the dog with the problem. So when a bar comes down, 2 things. If I'm doing handling and the bar comes down, I continue, finish the sequence, because I learned through one of my dogs that you can't stop after a bar, because the dogs then never learn how to rebalance after they knock a bar. So when they knock a bar in a trial, we don't want another bar. And if you keep stopping them after a knocked bar, then they never learn how to knock and then reorganize. right? So they need to learn, they need to have that ability, right? If they knock 2 in a row, I might stop and go, okay, whoa, let's start again. But if they knock 1, I'm going to just carry on, finish my sequence and reset the bar. And then I'm going to go back and look at what happened coming into that, because the bar knocking was just the result of a problem before. So if you just stop, put the bar up and make the dog jump that bar, you did nothing because you didn't address the problem. The problem was what happened in the striding coming into that. Now, that could be my timing. I could have been a crap timing, and so I caused the bar. That happens. It could have been coming out of something like a control obstacle and the dog didn't get on its rear end coming out of that and power up. It could be coming off of a running contact and now they're on their forehand and they don't know how to get back after being on their forehand for stuff like that. So I just don't believe that a knocked bar is really something worth making a big deal about. I'm going to look at the education of the dog. I'm going to look at my timing and my position and my handling in there. All of those things are my responsibility. They're not the dog's responsibility. I'm the one who trained the dog. I'm the one who has to address the jump work and what happened in that coming into that jump. And I'm the one who's responsible for the handling cues to be on time. So I can't really correct the dog for something that's not really their fault. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, and I didn't with Fame early on. I did later on, but this wasn't a bad correction. But because she had been a bit of a blocker, with Modo, I was like, right, I'm right from the beginning. Every pile, I'm just going to stop, pick it up. It's not going to be a big deal. I'm going to repeat it just to teach him not to touch the bars. And I can understand people's opinion on that, like, don't touch the bars, figure it out. But like you say, it's not educating them. It's just teaching them to jump bigger or to just don't touch things. And I do think that's part of Commotion's early takeoff problem. I look back at some old videos, I've videoed so much, and every time he collected as a young dog, he quite often had the bar, and I stopped him, I picked it up, and I truly believe I almost taught him not to collect because of that. And I kick myself for it because I didn't see it happening. But I thought this time I'm going to be super consistent, teach him not to touch bars. And I truly wish I hadn't, and I haven't with Susan. I've corrected. I've never really corrected. I've just done exactly what you just said, thinking, okay, well, she's going to have the odd one, and I just need to figure out why she's having it, rather than say, "Oh, don't touch the poles." Problem is, we all see people, like famous people, doing it, and you think, "Oh, okay, well, they're doing it. And their dogs are jumping clean. That's the way to do it. We've got to do it." But like you say, I think it's so much more on education, and so many times it is our fault they have the pole down. You know, we've a late cue, we've got in the way, the striding's wrong, we haven't done something right, where timing's been off. And like, is it fair to correct the dog? And a lot of people say yes, they've got to learn to do it even if I'm wrong, which is what a lot of people say in the UK. Even if I mess it wrong, they've got to figure it out, because I'm not going to be perfect all the time. It's just very much, I see it from both sides, but from my experience now with Commotion and with Fame, the 2 dogs I've had that were, well, not Modo wasn't particularly poly, but I think I caused a lot of his issues because of it almost. I think I now wouldn't be correcting bars anything like I used to. If they're doing it, if I truly believe they're being a lazy ass and they're just literally just running and not thinking, I might go, hey, come on now, calm yourself down and figure it out. But like you said, like if there was 2 or 3 in a row, you'd go, what the hell's happening? But the odd one is definitely not going to be something I correct, and I'm not going to encourage my students to correct anymore, because I think it can cause more problems rather than actually fixing the problems that are there. I would definitely encourage more grid work and understanding rather than just correction of the pole. So I think that's a very important point for people to understand.
Yeah, and I think people can actually do the opposite. They can also desensitize their dogs to knock bars by not addressing it in coursework and only addressing it in grid work. So if you just do grid work and your dog is a brilliant jumper, and then you go to coursework and you just ignore all the bars coming down and you ignore all the collection cues that aren't being responded to, I think you can actually desensitize the dog to bar knocking. They'll just learn, I just go fast and it doesn't matter here. And when we do grids, I jump clean here because it does matter to my handler here. So I don't think that you can just ignore the bars, but certainly finish the sequence and then go look at, okay, why can't they get this? Well, like, why is this bar coming down? Watch your video. If it was you, just fix your timing and your dog will probably keep the bar up. Yeah. But if you're struggling coming in, then you got to say, well, there's an education problem here. So I need to take that away from the coursework and educate, and then come back and bring that back into my coursework. Yeah. So I think you can do both if you're not careful. I just don't think it's fair to punish, because it's my responsibility. I need to do the educating, right? And I do think that dogs that have good grid work and good understanding of their jumping, they will compensate for you. They know how to make adjustments on the fly. They have very fast feet. They can make a little adjustment if your timing kind of craps out and they have to go, oh, Jesus, you meant that. Okay. So they will fix that for you once they're more experienced. I don't expect that in a young dog. So I do think that that's important. And I've always said that, you know, if you teach your dog to jump properly and your dog's jumping is predictable, you can predict that dog is going to do that cue that way because that's what I've taught, then the handling's easy, right? You just say, here, go do that, and you leave, and you trust the dog. You trust you're going to do that maneuver exactly the way I've trained it, and I can leave. So people who aren't as fast as a handler, I'm not that fast, but I can get out of there because I don't watch the dog do the jump. I always say, look for commitment, not performance. I don't care how you, once I send you, I can't do anything about it anyways. You go do your job. I got to go to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that generally is, I think, how my dogs get around on a course clean, because I don't stand there and watch to see if that bar is going to come down. I've trained you to do that. Go do that. I need to go over here because I'm slow and I need to get into position for your next thing. So I do think that, you know, that's also a super important point in jumping, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's really important. I think it's good for people to hear that, because I'm not saying it's anything is wrong, but I just think it's being a dog trainer, isn't it? And knowing the dog you're training. And I feel like I had a plan in my head about promotion. This is what I was going to do. And I think that was just shit dog training me, because you don't have a plan in your head. You always should be going with what the dog's giving you. But because he's nuts, I thought he could deal with it. But actually, he's far more sensitive than I was giving him credit for. Because even though he had a bar, he never did what Fane did and went, oh, no, I've had a bar, even though she never got told off. I had to teach her to come in, and I let her grab the pole and be a bit silly with it, because I didn't want to think it was a real negative. Whereas he always, right from the beginning, just ran back at me, barking, grabbing the pole, and I was like, calm down, calm down. You know, he never looked worried. But actually, I think inside he was thinking, oh God, I can't touch those. I better do something different, like jump higher, take off earlier, do something silly. So I think it is knowing your dog and being a good dog trainer and reading that dog. And, you know, it's taken me 4 years, unfortunately, to really understand him, because he is so crazy. And I wish I'd looked at it a little earlier, but hindsight's always a lovely thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think sometimes those dogs, so their choice then is, I don't know how to do it. I don't really know what you want. So I will just hurl myself at it to try to get it done as soon as possible. Right. And then probably 80% of the time he got it done.
Absolutely.
It was the 20%, you know. So
yeah, he does jump. It's not like he jumps bad. He jumps stunning, but he just takes off early, you know. He doesn't like collection. You know, I've tried lots of things to help him collect, with the no touch on the wing. You know, I didn't like that with a lot of dogs. I think they overturned, but because he never turned anyway, it did create a nicer turn for a while. But I had to repeat and repeat and repeat. And I hate all the repetition training he does. He doesn't maintain it. So that's why I want to give him more education now, which is why I'm doing all this stuff. Well, hopefully when he comes back when he's better.
Yeah, and that, well, we'll talk about that because that's in one of the questions, so we can get to that later.
Let's carry on. Right. We've gone off track.
I know.
I knew that. What are the different types of grids and what are their uses?
So everybody has their own grid programs and whatever, however they do it. I divide mine into 4 different types. So I have my foundation grids. So those are the low ones, teaching compression, the set points, all that kind of stuff. Mostly it's about balance, flexibility, fast footwork. There's not really a lot of height. It's more about how to use your body between jumps. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then I have my second batch, which I call essential elements. So these are the ones that are probably most important in agility. So can you judge the distance? Are you working up to full height? So that would be an essential element grid. Path. So those are super valuable. And so those all have to be taught individually. Like, do you understand your distance, et cetera, et cetera. Then I have scope or educational grids. So then I start taking some of those grids and start linking them together, which is kind of where you're starting with Susan now. It's like, can you do 2 or more different jumping elements together? Do you know how to transition from one to the other? So I'll just keep working on, can you go from extension to collection or extension to compression? Can you go from extension into a bend? Like those kind of things, right? Yeah. And then the last one is basically handling grids. So all my handling gets taught in a grid, because for me, all the handling maneuvers have specific takeoff points. There's specific jumping efforts. And so when I teach them, I really want to control all the footballs. And I really want to try to make sure the dogs are coming in at the correct angles. Are they weight shifted back for the jumping task? Because just blasting in there and not helping the dog get back first before the jumping task, that doesn't always help. Sometimes it helps to get them rocked back and then say, okay, here, I'm rocking you back. Now I'm giving you the opportunity to do what you want to do. Can you come into this handling maneuver and execute it properly? So then I do my handling grids, and then my coursework comes into that as well in those handling grids. So there's lots and lots of different things. I mean, there's a grid for everything out there, but
there is for you. We love a good grid, and I think it's brilliant. I love that you separate it into 4 sections like that. I think it's so clever just to know, you've got those grids for that, those grids for that, those grids for that, and then you can then just invent, you know it so much, you can just put together different grids, and you know what to do, what grids to do for specific issues, because you've seen so many issues, which is what they say about experience. It's not just about reading Susan Saylor's book and going, oh great, we'll put this grid up, this grid up, this grid up. Well, yeah, that's fine, that's gets you a bit of foundation stuff, but what about when you want to put things together to make it more like agility actually is, rather than just bounce grids? You're not going to get just a grid in a row when you go to a competition. So it is about the foundations building up to being able to add it together. So when they do come to competing and doing full courses, they've got all that understanding. I love that.
Yeah. And I think when people do a grid, when I do my clinics, I always say to them, okay, what's the purpose of this grid, guys? Like, you need to know what the purpose is and how it translates to agility. And then the second thing that I'm kind of seeing in some of the grid work that I've seen lately is, to me, there always has to be choice. I never put things in a place where the dog has no choice. So if you see a gazillion stride regulators to a jump, that to me takes all the choice out for the dog. I might use 3 jumps, and then there'll be a space where I'm saying to the dog, okay, I helped you by putting you on your rear and getting you prepped for this jumping task. Now you have a space that you can make a decision. You can choose to jump long. You can choose to jump 2 jumps. You can choose to collect or not collect. There has to be a choice. I think when you take choice away, dogs don't learn anything. They just go, okay, you'll just make me do it. So I think there always has to be a choice in the grids. And so if you're looking at grid work, like on Facebook or whatever, and you see a gazillion stride regulators, or you see 4 wings boxing the dog in, I'm like, if I have to box the dog in that much, maybe I'm asking for a jumping effort that the dog isn't actually physically capable of doing.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to change. Like, if your dog has a straight shoulder, they're not going to look like a border collie that has a good shoulder laid back doing that maneuver. You got to figure out for your dog, I mean, I might use a helper wing. The most I've ever used is 2, but I've never boxed a dog into something. And I might use a stride regulator, but it's there for a purpose. It's there to suggest a takeoff, but it's not there to force a takeoff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you have to be careful with when you're doing your grids, that you always ask, what is this for? How does this translate? And where is the choice for the dog in this grid? Like, is there actual learning happening? Just like we know in all of dog training, we always try to give the dog a choice. Hey, you could do this or you could do this. I'm going to reward the one that I like, but you're welcome to try the one that I don't like and see how that works for you.
Yeah, well, it's just the same as like luring versus shaping. We do lure some things. Of course, they do learn from luring, but it takes longer. But it's giving them those choices. And like you say, there's a lot of grid courses out there at the moment that I think, I'm not saying they're bad for the dogs, a lot of them, but I'm not sure it's actually really educating them deep down how to fix their issues when they get on course, because you're not giving them those choices, and they're going to have choices on course. Of course, they're not going to be like a grid work. They're going to have tons of choices to make. I think some grid work courses out there are looking dangerous in certain areas. I'm not obviously going to say which ones, but others I think I'm not saying they're going to be bad for them, but are they really teaching exactly what the dog needs? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that's why I think there has to be a choice. I never want my dogs to not have choice in their grids, because I need to be able to see that first pass, my dog makes the correct choice every time. That's what I'm looking for in each grid is, if I send you down the grid, does it take you 5 times to figure it out? Well, then we need more work. Yeah. And I'm looking for, okay, today it only took you 3 times. Okay, today it only took you once, and you got it bang the first try. Perfect. That means we're progressing. But if I never give you the choice, then how do I know if I'm actually getting any better? How do I know if the dog's learned anything?
I think that's a really good way of explaining it. Definitely. I like that a lot. Interesting. Very interesting. Cool. Let's go on to the next one. The height and distance between the jumps. Oh, hold on a minute. The height and distance between the jumps for a young border collie. Is that a question?
Yeah, so that's a hard one. Well, it's not a hard one. I think that people pick up books and they go, okay, well, it's a border collie, so they should do 6 feet. As you know, it's all dog dependent. It's dependent on size, structure, breed, obviously. So there is no I can't give you a blanket number. I actually have a picture. I can send it to you later and you can stick it in here. But one of my students has a 21 3/4 inch border collie and a 17 3/4 inch border collie. And she was shocked that the 17 3/4 inch border collie's grid was actually slightly wider than the 21 3/4 inch border collie.
Yeah.
But the 21-inch border collie was very square and short. And the little 17 3/4 inch had a better shoulder, longer body, and needed a little bit more space. So there's no one answer for that. You have to, everything is dog dependent. And that's why I think it's really hard to just pick up a book and do grids from a book. You have to really kind of know, okay, that dog is not compressing at all. We need to shorten that grid a little bit to get more weight shift. So there is no real one answer for that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because that's what I was saying about a lot of grids courses. You know, they just say this is the distance for a large dog. Well, large dogs, you know, there's a huge difference in height in large dogs. 2, totally different in structure. A lot of different structures. You know, got a border collie is not going to look like a some sort of Saluki breed or something like that. You know, there's so many different things. I'm not saying a lot of Salukis do agility, but you get the point. You know, some collies look like big fat show collies and some look like blooming lurchers. So, you know, it's so different. And I think that's what I like about your grids, is you're very specific with that, what that dog, the distance that dog does. And you don't go, oh, okay, it's a large dog, this is what you do. You say, try this, let's see what it looks like. Now we just move it a couple of inches there, a couple of inches there. And instantly you can see the difference. So I think that's very good to bring up, and what I like about what you do with your grids. So that's nice. Okay, how long before your grid work will translate to coursework?
Yeah, so like you said before, you can't do grid work for 2 months and say, okay, it's going to fix my jumping and coursework. It's just not. It's a program. It's a life. Sorry to burst your bubble, but, right? So unless you are working through all the different elements and combining them and finding out what your dog is struggling with, and then translating that eventually into some handling, like, can I put a grid into some handling? And unless you're maintaining your criteria and your coursework, it's not going to translate. Their dogs aren't stupid, right? It's like ring-wise dogs. If you don't maintain your sit-stay criteria in the ring, they ain't going to sit-stay in a ring. If you don't maintain your jumping criteria in coursework, they're not going to maintain it either, right? They're going to do whatever they want to do there, and they can figure out, well, grid work, I do this, coursework, I do that. So you have to keep up with, you know, what is my criteria for this sequence? So if you're doing a sequence that has, you know, some soft turns and some tight turns and some straight lines, what is your criteria for that soft turn? What is your cue for that soft turn? Are they maintaining that criteria? What's your cue for collection? Do you actually get a collected stride? If you don't, you need to stop and say, okay, what's going on here that he can't get this collected stride? Maybe my cueing isn't early enough and he doesn't have time for the compression part in order to get organized for that collected stride. So it's hard. You can't just say magically go and do these grids and then all of a sudden your agility is going to be brilliant. It doesn't work that way. I mean, I wish it did, but in my experience, if your dog has been practicing crap jumping for 5 years, you know, you can do some grid work that's going to help isolate, okay, what is this dog's issue? And strengthen the dog and find out exactly how close the dog can get. Maybe structurally, they can only get to a certain point. Those are all things you can go, okay, so collection for this dog is going to be here, but collection for this dog, because their shoulder is better, is going to be here. I know that now. So when I work this dog, I accept collection here. And when I work this dog, I accept collection there. So it'll help you with that kind of stuff. But unless you're going to actually do the work and translate that work over into your coursework, you're going to have problems. You're not, there's no magic fix, unfortunately.
No, I think that's a brilliant point. Because like with Modo and Susan, of course, I've been trying to create something in Modo which I don't think he can physically do. not maintain
Yeah.
anyway, which is, I've been trying to force him to be the dog I want him to be, instead of going, God, I've made so many mistakes with him, I feel awful now. But I've been saying, instead of trying to go, okay, this is what you do, I need to just accept that and just let you do it. But I, you know, figuring out that Susan, I'm like, that, no way, you can collect way better than that. And I know she can, because I've seen what she can do. But I think something important you said to me was, when I do, because obviously I'm going to bring Modo back to coursework as well. But you know, we did some grids to figure out what his distances was with his 1 stride and 2 strides. You know, I'm going to come back to the distance grid, and then when I go back to coursework, don't suddenly give him massive gaps and massive spaces to make him make bad decisions. Go put things, set things that you know he can do. So put the correct striding out for him, so you know he's practicing what he's been learning in the grids. I think you basically said that to me, didn't you? So he's not going out and making the bad decisions. He's going out, and I know he's on the correct distance for him to make the good decisions. So then slowly that will start manifesting and putting it all together and making him understand that he can do what he's doing in the grid in the coursework as well. I think that was the point you were trying to make to me.
Yeah, like when you're going to transition to course, I mean, obviously you don't get to pick the distances when you go to a trial, but you hope, like I always just go, okay, well, what are my minimum distances in the associations that I compete in? What are the maximum distances? And then I try to work my dogs so that they can do any of those distances. I mean, we've had this discussion about people think this 15 feet is horrible. And I kind of go, meh, it's nothing. Like I do routinely 18, 21, 21, 12, 15, 15. I would throw my dogs through any line of jumps, even with a 12-foot bounce into that, because they've been educated to look at that and go, meh, shift back, do that bounce, get out and go. So I never freak out about distances because they've had a ton of distance education. That is one of the most important exercises in our grid work, because that is where dogs struggle on course, because then they've got to deal with a handler and timing of cues and, you know, all different types of jumps and what's coming next after that distance. So distance, it's hard, but people just throw their dogs at, oh, well, just let's do the distance grid. There's a lot of steps in that, right? Like there's height in there, there's lots of different things that you have to work through and add together slowly. So you don't just do the distance grid where you change all the distances all the time. My dogs have worked through a progression where when I start changing all the distances, they go, meh, got it, right? Yeah. So I think that's a problem too, is people pick up a book and they think, well, my dog struggles with distance, so let's go do the hardest distance grid there, right? Well, that's not really fair either, right? There's definitely a progression, and I can't stand stuff being all over the place. I like a nice organized progression. This is what I want to work on. And then when the dog has that, I'll move to this, and, you know, and then I can start blending things. But I hate that random, oh, let's just pick something out of a hat and try this. I don't think it works like that.
Well, that's definitely, I do hate it as well. I don't like them setting a line of minimum distance, because my dogs haven't had the jump training, so they can't deal with it. They can't deal with a line of 5 meters. I don't think it's not fair on them, which is why I don't like it, because I think so many dogs haven't had the jump training in UK. So they come, we've made them fast, they're powerful, they come to this line of 5 meters and they're literally flipping themselves inside out, and it is dangerous when they haven't had it. So either something else needs to change, and you know, we teach our dogs to jump better, or we the judges stop setting stupid distances for young dogs that I don't figure out. When my older dogs come up to those distances, I actually don't mind so much. So they have more understanding of jumping. It's the younger ones I hate, because I personally haven't done the jump training that they can deal with that. And I do think for them, it makes them slow up in the ring. They don't have those distances as often abroad, and their dogs are learning to extend and go fast a lot, whereas we're doing a lot of shorter distances in the UK. So they're learning to back off. And because they haven't got the skill to do it, they don't just go in nicely, they back off in a bad way, and they then crash and they take off in the wrong spot. So I think, yeah, that's why I personally don't like it, because I don't think many dogs, including mine, can deal with it. And now you see so many dogs flicking, like hyperextending, crashing, trying to take things as spread. I mean, it's just horrible. But that's why, and I think, like I said, the lower grade shouldn't have that, because even if you have done grid work, a lot of dogs won't have done it enough to understand those distances. As they go higher grade, they do have a better, obviously, because they've learned just how to jump better. From experience. But that's why I don't like the shorter distances, because I haven't done the jump grids, whereas your guys would probably go in and go, oh yeah, I can do these, because they've seen it all, you know, from the start.
Yeah, and I know what my association allows for minimum distance. So I always train slightly shorter than that so that I know that, because sometimes like a judge will say it's 15 feet and I'll pace it off and go, yeah, it's actually 14, but whatever. But I'm like, well, my dogs know how to do that. They can bounce 12 if they need to. So I'm never really worried about that, but I also don't put them in a ring until I know they can do that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So my dogs are starting their grid work, from 5 months old. Right. And they're not jumping. But I think one of the things I see right now is there's a lot of low coursework happening. People are doing a lot of sequencing and threadles and backsides and stuff with their young dogs at 10 inches. And they have this impression that because they're doing it low, it's okay. And, really height is one of the easiest things for dogs. I mean, how many 12-week-old puppies can leap onto the couch and leap onto the bed? Height is not an issue. I'm not saying they should put height in, because jumping down is not good for puppies, obviously, but going up is really not a problem. The problem is exactly what you're saying. Do they judge distance? Are they strong enough to compress to collect? Can they pick correct angles of elevation? So if they're doing backsides and threadles at 10 inches for 10 months, they're going to have a heck of a time when they get older, because the takeoff spots have been then, like we said, patterned to be incorrect. And then you put them up to 24 or 20 inches or whatever, and all of a sudden everything changes for the dog, but punished for knocking the bar. Well, I've been doing this since you were 6 months old. You should know how to do this. Well, it's completely different and it's not the same. And I don't think that just saying the height is low, so it's okay to do coursework, I don't think that's smart. I think that that's asking a dog to do all the other elements. The only thing you're taking out is height. Right. So for me, coursework implies my dog's already got the understanding of all those elements. It has had the time to build height, to build muscle, to get the bone density, to handle this pressure. So when somebody comes to me and says, oh yeah, we can run a course, I'm like, okay, well, that says to me that your dog knows how to do all the things and put them all together. And I don't think puppies can do that. There's nothing that's going to replace time, growth, strength, muscle, all of that. You can't rush through that. I don't care how good of a trainer you are. I don't care how good your timing is. You can't replace that. I kind of always liken it to, if you want your kid to be a world champion or Olympic figure skater and you pair them with the Olympic champion, if your kid is 10, it's just because it's paired with an Olympic champion doesn't mean that it's going to be brilliant. The kid still needs to grow up. The kid still needs to learn how to skate, right? They need to learn all the footwork. So I think it's the same for agility. Nothing is going to replace time and strength and maturity. And I just think that people are just using the excuse of one element of jumping makes it okay. And I don't think that makes it okay.
I think it is, your view on it is very different to most people's view right these days, because everyone wants to do courses young. I'm one of them. We all do courses young and sequencing young. I mean, I don't start threadles till a little bit older than a lot of people, this is so generalizing, but in Europe they do harder stuff younger, because they can win up their grades so much younger. Within 3 shows they can be at their highest grade, whereas it takes us at least a year, if not a year and a half, we have to win so much through the lower grades to get up there. So yes, Susan can do, she's 19 months now, she can do threadles, she can do backsides, but she can't do them well yet. She can't do them proof. She doesn't know it. I do it, but I don't do it like crazy, like a lot of people would. You see, and that's the problem. People at world champs are winning the world champs with their 2-year-old dogs. And it is encouraging people to want their dogs to be able to do it all at 2 years old. When, I would never expect my 2-year-old dog to go to the world champs, let alone win the world champs. It just wouldn't happen. Even with Susan, who I think can do quite a lot, still nowhere near ready for that kind of stuff. The amount of training they must have put into those dogs to be able to do that is, I think, unbelievable. So yes, I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I do a lot of the things you're saying. I do them, teach them slow. I don't teach them at crazy speed originally, but this why, and I keep saying it, is why I'm coming back to doing a lot more grid work. So I used to, I think, teach my dogs more jump work than I do now. But because agility has changed and it has become more, let's get the dog out, let's get the dog sequencing more, when I've had foreign trainers come over and they bring their young dogs and they're doing all these crazy things at 10 months, I think, oh my God, my guys can't do any of that. But then even though I'm not probably thinking, I want to do that, I think inside my head is going, my dogs can't do that. Maybe I should be doing that kind of stuff. You do get, I'm impressionable like most people, and I see that and I think I want my young dogs to be able to do that. But, and like you say, they don't understand to, and they're learning to do it on low jumps, which is totally different takeoff spot, totally different how they have to come into it. The collection's different, everything's different. So, and we teach them so much speed to on the low jumps, and again, it's so different. They're so flat, and then all of a sudden the height comes up, and they suddenly lift. I've really noticed this with Susan. She, every time I put the height up with her, which is different from my others, she has jumped badly because she's come in and gone, oh, what the hell, because she's trying to do it fast, and she jumped like a cat, and I didn't get that with my others. So it was really interesting to me. Each time the heights went up, I had to take things back again and almost reteach her to jump everything and do all the skills again on the height. So I definitely think I want to go back a bit, and I'm not saying I won't do it, but I'll definitely do more of this kind of stuff, the grid stuff that we're talking about, rather than just chuck straight into threadles and backsides and sequencing and blah, blah, blah. So I think it's, you know, I feel like I'm always learning. I always want to learn. I don't ever want to be one of those trainers that goes, oh, I know it all, you know, and I think this is definitely something I've decided I want to get more into with all my young dogs. So very good.
I think it'd be interesting to track those dogs that were in World Championship Set 2 and go find out how many of them are injured by 3.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the problem is a lot of people are now better at, and I will bring her up because we've talked about this, you know, Teresa Kralova will say, you know, but I think the dog is special. Not many dogs could do what she's done so young. And still be really good. But Teresa's amazing at her conditioning work. She gets the dog treated a lot. She really looks after the dog's body well. And I don't think, once she almost got what she wanted, she did back off on her training a lot. She was just had that real obsession. I want to be world champion. And she did it. You know, she was world champion. She won everything. And now the dog is older and it still looks really good, but it has just had 2 years off with Corona. So you don't know. But I agree. A lot of the young dogs that I've seen young, do well, aren't competing still. You know, Confame was still competing at 9 years old, and I think a lot of them aren't. I think a lot of our dogs still, mine and Dan's dogs, still compete old. The only one I had break, which was Dobby, and I definitely didn't do much with him because I was at uni and I didn't have any equipment. So I think you know, some dogs will just break younger, some dogs will go on and on, but I think if you look at as a whole, I do think dogs that are trained a lot younger definitely don't have such a long career, and I think a lot of people are happy with that, and that's up to them. But I personally do want my dogs competing until 8, 9 years old. So it is an important point how much you do with them young, and are you chucking them at things their bodies are not ready for or they don't understand. And like you say, it's injury prevention if they understand how to jump better, which is your main point for doing your grids, you say, because you think it teaches them how to use their bodies better. So yeah.
And like I said, they can be injured and still running agility and look fine.
Absolutely. I think a lot of dogs are. A lot of dogs are injured. I think Fame's had that cruise ship problem for a long time, but she was running agility looking fine. And I kept resting her and stuff. And that, I think I was just a ridiculous accident off a dog walk. But look how good she was still doing. Dobby was still doing agility with a bulging disc in his lumbar spine. So, you know, they work through so much, don't they? And they still look good. But I think if I'd been doing grids, it would have shown up a lot more.
Probably, because momentum will take over, right? If they've got momentum, they can work on 3 legs. They can just toe tap on the leg that's bugging them, and you might not actually even see it.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
No, for sure.
Let's look at these questions quickly. I think we've kind of covered a lot of those ones. How often do you do your grid work? I think that's a good one.
Well, for me, I mean, my students, we do a grid class a week. So I've been teaching Thursday night grid class since 2004. So all of my students and my dogs, we all do jump work once a week. Now in the summertime, when we're on holidays or traveling or whatever, we might not get it once a week, but remember our summer only lasts like 3 months and that's all we get outside. So for the most part of the year, we go once a week. We do a couple of grids in class once a week. So I just think it just keeps it. And my students will tell you their favorite class is jump class. That's their absolute favorite class. So,
but when they're young, you do, obviously, because you do that more than you would do any kind of sequencing or anything like that. That's all you do, is that right? Or what would you say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many other things you can do, like with puppies. I mean, I'm always working on their tuck sits, and I'm working on their sit up, which we've talked about. I'm working on their toy control games. I'm working on, decel on the flat. Like, do you pummel yourself into the toys, or do you know how to sit back? I mean, there's lots of little things that you can do as puppies that helps them with their jumping later. So yeah, but yes, everything I'm going to do with regards to handling, I don't do any handling, but they'll get a grid a week probably, and there may be 2. So it just kind of flows together, and then there's a definite progression. So where are we at now? Okay, let's try this grid this week and see what we have. And maybe I need to stay there for a couple of weeks, so that's how I do it. I just kind of.
But with your guys, you think when they're what you would call trained, about once a week, you set up a few grids for them and just see if you think they had a problem. Would you do them more regularly?
If I was doing coursework and I noticed that, say, they're losing collection, or there's a specific space where they're struggling, I think that they're taking off a bit early or not centering over the bar, then my grid work for that week might be, let's go back and do the distance grid. Or if I think that the doubles or spreads are not looking as nice, I might go back and do a grid that has a double or a spread in it. If there's a specific handling cue that I think they're getting weak on, then I might go back and set up a grid to help them remember what to do with their feet on that particular handling cue. So after I do any kind of trials, I go look at every round at their jumping efforts on every jump of every round. Are they centered? Are they making good choices? Do I get the collection when I ask for it? And then I make a plan. Okay, well, we need to go back and address this, or no, actually, that looks really good. So let's move on and let's start teaching some new handling maneuvers or whatever. Right.
I think something you've pushed in the grid course I've been doing with you is like, don't overdo, don't do too many reps of each grid. I think people will do rep, whereas actually it's really tiring for them. And like you tell me to do like 3, 4, 5 reps and then done. And then, if that, depending on which ones I'm doing. So I think that's important, is you don't overdo the reps, because it's not, and you're not correcting the poles in them. You're just letting them figure it out themselves and go through it like that.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, good one. I've done that one. When do you start? So you said you started about 5 months old?
Yeah, it depends on the dog. Like if it's a male, I might start a little bit later because they're a little bit floppy longer.
Yeah.
Females tend to sort of tighten up a little earlier, and really all the puppy grids, it's just bumps. There's no jumps.
Yeah, of course.
So it's just footwork, right?
Yeah.
It's looking at their sit stays. Can they hold the sit stay when the toy goes down? Do they pummel their shoulders in for the toy? That kind of stuff. So, those things. You can do lots of stuff with puppies that doesn't really require any jumping.
Yeah, absolutely. When are grids not appropriate?
I think for some dogs that have vision issues, for sure, I think grids just stress them out. So I might not suggest grid work for those types of dogs. There's lots of people out there who have ETS dogs who still compete. You just have to learn how to handle them from a different spot, or a spot that's comfortable. If the dog has any kind of undiagnosed injury or a sort of chronic injury, arthritis, whatever, I wouldn't overdo them. The low puppy grids or the foundation grids a couple of times is not going to hurt them and might help. So I would be careful about that. And then the other thing I get is people who just want to fix a specific problem, and they want a grid to fix their backsides or throttles. It doesn't really work like that either. I don't think that's really appropriate. You really need to figure out all of the pieces that the dog is struggling with, and not try to just pick a grid that's going to magically fix that stuff.
Yeah,
I just don't.
Not magic, unfortunately. Yeah, no, good one. So I think one lady said, I think it was Pat said, she said, oh, it ruined her dog's jumping. Can grid work ruin your dog's jumping? I mean, I think she'll probably just not do maybe the correct grids, but what do you think about that?
I think if you do it wrong, for sure. Like, I think that if you just randomly throw grids at your dog, that the dog will do its best to get through something. But if you're looking at the dog and you see that the jumping is weird, you need to stop and you need to figure out, like, why is that weird? I always say to my students, if dog was a horse, would you want to be on the back of that horse doing that grid? If you look at a grid and your dog is like hyperextending all over the place and their backs are flopping all over the place, or they're like all weird and tucked up, and you go, would I want to ride that dog? Then there's probably something wrong with that grid. I mean, to me, it should look smooth, beautiful, soft, controlled, powerful, all of that stuff. And I would be happy to sit on the back of that dog.
Yeah.
So I do think it can, if you do things not correctly, or you're working with somebody who isn't making adjustments for your dog to get rid of that weird looking jumping. But if you keep going and going and going with the weird looking jumping, well, you're going to get what you get.
Yeah.
Fix it. right? Stop, just stop and say, okay, there's something wrong here, and get some help.
Yeah, no, good one. Why don't you use multi-wraps to teach collection? Or do you?
Well, we kind of talked about that. First of all, I don't like my dogs obsessing about wings. So I really want my dogs looking at bars of jumps, not wings of jumps. Secondly, I think dogs only have a finite number of turns in them. And I don't think multiple times around something, I don't think it's useful. And I think it's just wear and tear on my dog's shoulders. So one turn around a cone, I have no problem with to get going. But I also don't think it teaches collection because, like I said before, all the prep for collection comes like 6 to 10 feet before that jump. So why wouldn't I focus on what happens before the wing? Once they get to the wing, everything's done. There's nothing I can do about it at that point. Yeah. So to me, I don't like to put wings in. I don't want dogs to try to hug wings too much because on different jumping tasks, sometimes I don't want you to hug that wing. Sometimes I want you to come longer and take off closer to the other wing. So I think it makes dogs obsessed about wrapping the wings too tight, and then you really have troubles getting rid of that later. So I will use a cone and a single wrap, but that's used for different things. It's used for commitment, forward focus, that kind of stuff. It's not really used specifically originally for collection. I just don't think it's useful. I think it just creates this misconception in the humans that it's going to make their turns tight. And going around a cone twice, collection is part of a stride. So collection has to come from extension. And when they're wrapping a cone, there's no collection. They're already collected. It's just bending. It's bending in a circle. So it's really got nothing to do with collection. If I want to work collection, I need to work the extension from extension into the collection. That's where the work comes. And so wrapping around a wing to me is just more stressful.
That's how I felt. I've never been a multi-wrapper. I always felt like they're always going to wrap the second time. Of course, it's the first time that's the important time. And I think it's just so physically hard on them, especially when it gets up to full height, to come bending back in on themselves. And I just don't feel like many dogs, maybe the odd one it's going to work for because it teaches them to stick tight to the wing. But I don't think many dogs it will really teach them to actually turn tight. I think the ones that are turning tight were probably going to turn tight anyway, to be honest. And I also don't feel that. And I think, like you say, it's effort, it's hard on their shoulders and everything. So I agree with that. Definitely.
And it started really early nowadays. Like everybody starts puppies on wrapping. And I'm like, oh my God, like those puppies' shoulders are not strong enough for that. Their rear ends are not strong enough. I know when I started Versus grid work, he was 14 months old when I his collection work. So I have a whole progression of collection work. It starts, it's got a long thing before you get to the jumping. But when I started it, he could not turn around a cone nicely at all at 14 months. I was like, oi, I have to stop and go back and do some more fitness work. And I need to let him get a little bit more strength. And, in 2 months, when I went back to the progressions and I asked him to go around a cone, he was like a completely different dog. There was no point in continuing it at 14 months. He was just not strong enough to do it. And that was just going around a cone. That was it. And I'm like, if he can't go around a cone and keep his butt underneath him, he's never going to be able to do that over a jump. So what's the point, right? So
that's where your experience comes in. You can see that. I think just people just wouldn't generally see that, which is why it's so important to follow the grid course early on so that you can get a better eye for what your dogs are doing. And definitely, we do so much slow-mo, and you make me look at everything in slow-mo, and we repeat and we do this, and it's so interesting to watch what they're actually doing with their bodies. Really interesting. Yeah. Cool. I've done that one. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit because I keep bringing it up. Do most dogs know how to jump naturally? What do you think is naturally? What does that even mean?
I think if they're running through the forest and they get to pick their own, here's a log, I'm going to jump over it, yada, yada, yada. And like I said, height, I really don't think is that big of an issue for most dogs. But because we have such extreme distance changes and speed and angles of approach and angles of elevation and different types of jumps, I think you can have a dog that in life handles the jumping quite nicely, jumping on, like you said, onto a couch or into the vehicle, and they just kind of go, great, that's fine. But when it comes to putting all those other things together, I think pretty much every dog struggles with some part of that. And it could be structural, it could be vision, who knows, right? It could be just experience. So I've seen dogs that start out, people say, oh, my dogs have all been great jumpers and I've never had to do jump work. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's okay, great. And I watched that dog's career, and probably within 2 or 3 years of competing, the dog is now stuttering before jumps that they weren't stuttering before. So I personally think that it's just better to err on the side of caution and make sure your dog understands all the tasks that are going to be asked of them in agility. Agility is hard. I mean, it's hard work. So I think it's only fair. I want my dogs to be as prepared as they can be. I think it's only fair of me to say, hey, you're going to get faced with this and this and this. There's a whole bunch of stuff you're going to have to deal with out there. So let's just educate you on all of those pieces and teach you how to put them together. And then, you know what, make your choices when you get out there. Sometimes they make a mistake. I'm not saying a grid work dog is never going to knock a bar. I'm not saying my dogs don't ever knock a bar. Usually it's me, but generally they can save themselves more times than not. Fen can run 12 rounds at a trial at 24 inches and not ever knock a bar. He just goes, I'll fix it for you, Mom. Don't worry. That's what I'm looking for. He'll keep himself safe. I don't have to worry about that. I can just try to do my job.
Yeah.
So
I think from my experience, obviously I train a lot of dogs that haven't had no grid work, and some dogs do just understand. They can get themselves out of trouble. They can figure out their takeoff spots are good. And even if they do mess up the takeoff spot, they somehow figure out their bodies to get over the jump. Other dogs, more like the dog like Commotion, just doesn't really have a clue. Like, he just doesn't understand takeoff spots. He's the one that's made me want to get into this more, because he's the first one I've had that's been, maybe Boss was a little bit bad too, but he fixed it better. But he just takes, if Boss took off too early, he would make it. Whereas Modo takes off so early, there's no physical way he can make it over that bar. So I think that some dogs do just have, and there's definitely in lines, if you look at lines, some lines just see takeoff spots lovely, and other lines you can't. Like our Linwoods, Urban and Trendy, that me and Brenda had, you could see from early on they were going to stutter stride at jumps. And I truly believe there's something wrong with their eyes, which is why they do it. But you could see right from jump bumps, they were like, they couldn't quite figure it out. And the higher the jumps got, the worse they got. But they were, so Trendy was physically capable enough to figure it out, even when she got it wrong. But you could see early on she was not going to be a natural jumper. The same with Modo. I could tell as soon as the height went on, he wasn't going to turn. I could tell he wasn't going to put strides in. He didn't understand the collection. He didn't understand any kind of compression. He just wanted to leap and try and land short. And then I was then corrected too many poles, which I think made him even worse. So I didn't look at that enough. But yeah, I do think there are dogs that are definitely better naturally at just figuring out their jumps. Like I've gone Susan's line. I went for a line that was related to a dog like Teresa Say and Jack, because that Ray line don't have a lot of poles. You look at a lot of their dogs, they don't have bars down. They retry their hardest not to touch the bars. And I thought that's something I need, because a lot of my dogs have bars, because I don't obviously train it very well. And she doesn't. She actually is what and I've done the grid work as well now. Well, I'm starting it. I think she has a lot less than all of my dogs have at her age.
Yeah, but if you look at Teresa and Lisa, I mean, there's a big component of handler there, right? Those handlers are, their timing is impeccable. They know where they need to be. If you can run that fast and be there to control everything, then your dog's going to be a good jumper, because you can manually do that. But if you are not a fast runner, or not as fast as your dog, you best be teaching them how to do those jobs without you, because you're not going to be there every time.
This is my problem. I'm getting slower. Yeah. Older. No, that was a good point. So was any of these others good that we haven't really covered? We've kind of done that one. What types of jumping issues are most common in your experience? I think this will be the last one, because that's quite a good one.
Well, I do think that not understanding where their own takeoff spot is,
I think that's a big one.
That's a big problem, understanding jumping arc. I do think distance challenges, some dogs just don't read that fast enough. Takeoff spots for things like backsides and threadles. People have forgotten that, those things, if you do them too young I don't ever teach those to a dog that isn't jumping full height. I always want my dogs on full height before they learn those. So if people have taught those, I get people who come to me and say, I want to do a jump class, I need to fix my backsides. I'm like, How long has they been knocking the wings and bars? Oh, 4 years. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to fix that now. So I think that poor understanding of takeoff spots, because like for me, for a backside, there's 4 different takeoff spots for a backside, depending on where the exit line is. So the dogs need to be taught, you can't take off here for all 4 exit lines. It doesn't work that way. You need to learn how to do those differently for each backside cue. Throttle, there's really only 2 takeoff spots, but still it's going to be different at 10 inches than it is at 24. So there's takeoff spot issues big time. Not understanding how to get in deep and lift the shoulders. That's, you know, a set point issue. So I think there's lots of weird stuff happening out there. Like you said, some dogs just figure it out. They'll just, you know, add a stride here or there. I think with those dogs, the strides aren't necessarily added appropriately. Like I might have said, that dog didn't need to add that stride. They could have just weight shifted back here and kept the stride out, but they added it in and kept the bar up and fine. And then they look like they're a really natural, great jumper. But go back and look, did he need 3 strides and 18 feet?
Yeah.
Probably not. Did he do it because he misjudged the first part? Maybe, and kept the bar up. Great. So does that make for a natural jumper? I don't know. I kind of want to know that my dog will make those adjustments and leave the strides out where they can. You know, but you have to go back.
That was my problem I had with Fame. She was the opposite of commotion. I always wanted less strides from her because I didn't think, I very much know that she, even though I would say she was quite a natural jumper, if you want to say it like that, she always made a pretty shape and she was very fluid, but she would not read lines. Like she wouldn't, there was even a slight like dog leg turn, she wouldn't read or look for the line that was coming up. She would jump the jump she was on and then go, oh shit, better put in a little stride to make sure I can do it. And that's when she had the bars, because she would get too deep to things, because she would just add in strides to make sure she could figure out, instead of looking ahead and figuring out where she had to take off. And I think that's why she had bars. Modo's the opposite, because he just launches at everything. So 2 completely different dogs that could have done grid work for 2 totally different reasons. But I think both of them, Susan's very much in the middle. I think she doesn't take off too early, often like Modo does, but also doesn't put in the little strides like Fame does. She is more I think my most natural jumper. But also I've been working on her grid work as well with you. So I 100% saw an improvement almost straight away. I think that she was actually understanding her body better. But I think she was the most natural one I've had in the long run, looking at the last 2 I've had especially. So I think it is, like you say, the takeoff spots and reading what's happening. That's what I like about grids as well, and what we do. Like you say, they look for the line because they're going to something. They don't just think about the one they're on. They always look forward and look ahead, what's coming up.
Looking for work. And when I watched Susan's video from the trial, I stopped on every jump, and she was quite lovely on her center line. Like she was centered on her bars way better than she was when we did that one test, right? Definitely. So that was good. You know, so that's what I always look at. I always go back and go, okay, if my dog landed on their face over there, why did they land on their face? So what didn't I do to tell them, hey, we have a turn coming up? Maybe it was a cueing problem. If your dog is landing on its shoulder, something went wrong. You either didn't cue it properly, or there's something wrong in their education there. So you got to go back after your trials and really, like, I just stop every jump at the arc. Are they centered? Did they land on their face on that? How long did it take them to figure out where we were going? Were they head checking me? Like you said, with Modo, you've got some head checking issues. I really think grids teach them, look for work. If there's a grid and there's always another grid, go look for that. And I will tell you when to turn. I will teach you the cues for the turns. But if you don't hear a cue to turn, just go to what you see. And if I don't cue the turn and they go to what they see, they're not wrong. I let my dogs go off course because I'm like, well, that wasn't their fault. Obviously, I didn't give them that information early enough for them to be able to set themselves up for that turn. So if they jump long and they're looking out there and then I'm like, hey, I'm over here, and they go, oh, what happened? That was my problem. That was my fault. So, you know, I think that's something you also got to just go back and look at your videos. Every time the dog went long or landed on a shoulder or slipped or whatever, go figure out what you did wrong.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Like I obviously watched Susan's video back massively, and she only had 2 poles out of 6 runs, which is unheard of for my dogs in their first competition. And both of them were entirely my fault. I was late, and the time she actually jumped, I didn't like how she jumped. Again, I was late with my cue every time. I knew at the time I was like, fuck, too late with that. But because young dog, and we all do silly things with young dogs, so we're just so nervous getting them in the ring. But absolutely, the pole shed down. both times were completely my fault. And if you watch her after, each time she had to pole down, she jumps massive on the next one to make sure she doesn't. She really does try not to. And I think because she has more of an education on what to do, oh shit, yeah, that was wrong. Even though she hasn't been corrected for them, like Modo was, she tried harder to make sure she did a nice jump on the next jump she'd saw. And I do think that was because she has a better jump education already. And I've only just started on this journey with her. So I'm excited.
That pole that she had down on the second jump.
Yeah.
You did the same thing when you showed the video of you guys practicing before the trial. You had the same second pole on one of those.
Yes.
And both of them, I was like, Dave, make her sit back, make her sit back. You waited until she got forward, and then she was completely off balance for the first jump. So that's what I mean about the pole. The second bar was because of the start line. It didn't have anything to do with the second bar. It was how she came over the first bar that was the problem. So you needed to wait till she shifted back before you released her. So I think that would have solved both problems.
I'm getting too excited on the start line. I want to start.
Let her sit back and get her weight on her rear, and she'll not have a problem.
I've been working on her sit-ups. Sit up.
Yeah, but you don't make her sit on the start line. You stand.
Oh, I do a stand, don't I? Yeah. Do you think it sits better? That's a good question.
Well, you can do the stand, but I would teach her, I'm not going to release you until you rock back in the stand. Okay. Don't get on your shoulders in the stand. Get on your rear in the stand. I don't have a problem with either one. I use a sit personally, but the stand is fine. Just teach her that your release cue is you rocking back. And that also works really well for stopped contacts. I never release my dog on their forehand when they're going to a jump after a contact. I always wait. I want to teach my dogs, you need to weight shift if you want to get off, because it puts you in a better position for the next task, which is usually a jump of some sort, right?
Would you ever go from a down?
I don't, because I think it takes too long to get out. Like, we have really short start lines sometimes. Like, our start lines are like 10 feet from the ring barrier. Now, you could put them in a down for a tunnel, weed pulls, contact, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't like them in a down for jumping, because I think it takes too long to get up, get underneath them, and then get going. So you need a really long start line for that, I think.
Did a little thing recently. They timed their dogs just on the flat, so no jumps, so it's obviously different, and they timed it from a sit, a stand, a down, and just over, I think, I can't remember how long distance was, but just running, and all the dogs she timed were quicker from the down, just running on the flat, than they were from the sit or the stand. Obviously, when they go to a jump, it's going to be different, because they've got to adjust themselves differently, but I thought that was very interesting, and I think that's the kind of studies we need to do more of like, what's the fastest, but is the fastest the best to be able to jump properly? Does height change that? You know, can a smaller dog go from a down and still do it, or is it only going to be a problem for the larger dogs? I love things like that, and actually, I wish people did more of that kind of thing.
Smaller dogs would be easier because they could get more strides in that same space. But a big dog, I mean, a big dog really only has 1 to 2 strides between a jump on any agility course. And I saw that same thing, and I said, so that's all fine and dandy from a down when they're just running flat, because it completely changes the mechanics when you actually ask them to jump. That's why I said I have no problem with the down if it's a tunnel as the first thing, or a dog walk, or pulls, or whatever. Great, go. But if it's jumping, I would pick a stand or a sit personally.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting to know. Yeah, and I will definitely be working on her sitting back a little bit, because she does like to push, and then I get excited, and then we go. So it's something, it's, you know, a lot of us do that, you know, that's why having a weight is so important. And you know, interesting. So my dogs always do better from a sit anyway, as in they always stay better. So that's something I should be working on more. Interesting. Very good. I really enjoyed that, Kim. That was a very good chat and discussion. I think we got a lot of points in there. Good points. Yeah. So thank you so much. And just quickly, your online training, just explain how it works to people.
Just message me and I can add you to the main group. But my jump grid classes, like, people want to jump in the middle and be like, well, you know, my dog's running in masters or G3 or whatever. Do I need to go to foundation? You can answer that, because
yes, you do.
Now you kind of know that we have to see that stuff. I have to see what the dog is doing and what it's not doing. And we have to make sure those foundation grids are fixed and set for your dog. So the grid work stuff, you really do need to start in foundation. We do have a puppy grid class for puppies, just to get them going on the patterns and stuff. So, you know, there's that if people want to start earlier.
how often do you run them? Are they open all the time, or do you just open them?
No, they kind of run in sort of 2-month segments. We're coming up to the end of this session. We'll run another one sort of beginning of May, end of April-ish.
Okay.
Because there's only one of me, and it's not something I can farm out to other people. Like I have to look at all of the videos. So
do you suggest people did them like when they're on a non-competing season, so they can just stick to the grids, or do you think it's okay to be doing it at the same time as competing and doing their sequencing, or what do you think of that?
It depends. It depends on what your goals are. I mean, if you're trying to fix something in coursework, then if you're going to do coursework, then I would avoid the things you're trying to fix in that coursework, work other things. And then when you do put it in coursework, like I said to you, like if you know that her perfect one stride distance is 15 feet, then try to keep your jumps in her one stride distance. And you can still work the handling, but make sure it's a distance that she's comfortable with and successful with. Don't give her like a gazillion different distances and expect that to translate. So I think it really depends. The best thing to do is just start from the beginning with your young dogs and just stick the program. I mean, somebody asked me, how many grids do you have on one of those questions?
I missed that one.
I mean, we have like over 50 grids. I have 6 levels of advanced jumping, not including the foundation stuff or whatever. So, I mean, there's a grid for everything, really. And we keep coming up with more. If somebody comes up with a problem and I go, how can we fix that for that dog? Sometimes I can make a grid that I'm like, hey, that's actually a really good grid for everybody. Yeah. So we wind up adding more exercises, right? So, I do think the best thing to do is just start at the beginning and work through everything. People I think because they can't see how the foundation stuff is going to translate. Now, when I do my clinics, I do a lecture that shows like this grid translates to this in real life. And, so that makes people go, oh, okay. And then they're more comfortable with working through the foundation stuff. But a lot of people, I can't always do that lecture, obviously, because online it doesn't really work. So sometimes people go, meh, I did grids for 2 months and it did nothing. Well, yeah, no shit. It's not going to in 2 months, right? Like you showed me 3 videos at 1 minute long and that was it. And then off you went and never saw you again. So don't say the grid work didn't help, right? It's a program. There's a progression, and the dogs need time, right?
People have to remember that it's not just a magic fix. You do a few grids. When I decided to do it, I wanted to get right into it and do it properly. So you do have to remember that if you're going to do it, anyone, you stick to it. And it's like you say, a program. It's not a quick fix. Do a couple of grids, off you go, done. You have got to stick to it. And like definitely with my young dogs from now on, I'll be going through a program with them and definitely doing more with my youngsters. I think a lot of people get stressed. Oh, my dog's this old, I can't do it now because already doing this, already doing that. I feel too. I think a lot of people, from what you were saying, with how much there is to do, will feel like almost overwhelmed by it. But I think as long as you're just methodical with it, work through little bits, and like I say, every dog is different. But that's what I like about you is you have your feedback options as well, so you can send in, so you can tell them what they need to be doing. I think it can be overwhelming, but you just have to suck it up for a bit, maybe look at it. That's why I'm saying I would personally prefer to do it over like winter when there's less shows or not competing, so I can just stick to doing that for a bit, get the foundation set in, and then like you say, just do it once a week or something after that and just work through everything slowly, and then I can do other things at the same time. But I do think sticking to the foundations initially would be really great and getting them really set in.
And I think that you just have to, I think it educates people, even if you get in and do the first sort of couple of levels, and then you kind of know what you're looking for. It's like, oh, when something goes wrong in your handling, you can go, geez, I really don't think that jumping arc was very good, or that takeoff point wasn't good, or he didn't get his shoulders up there. So at least, even if you're not fixing it necessarily, at least you're aware of what the problem is.
Yeah.
Right. And then I don't want the dogs to be punished in handling for bad jumping when it's really an education part that's missing, right? Which I see a lot of. I see a lot of dogs being told off for, jumping problems. And I'm like, it's not the dog's fault there, right? But just going through the grids makes you go, oh yeah, I let her leave when she was too far on her shoulders, or whatever. You start to learn what you're looking for in your dog and what's good in your dog and what's not, and where they struggled. So even if you're gonna, start in the middle of your, you've already been competing for 4 years, that's okay. You're just gonna educate yourself, and the next puppy, hopefully you'll have more education and you'll see things earlier. you know, I mean, even our puppy grid class, we're just doing a little grid just to test, like, how does that puppy read distance, right? And some of them are like coming in and naturally just going, oh, I can't barrel into that part of it. And some of them go, woo. And I'm like, it's okay. It doesn't matter what they do. It's just information so that when we get to that stuff, we have a better idea if this dog's going to struggle with that, or if they're, how fast did they fix it? So it's just kind of fun to learn. And you'll probably find the more you do the grids and the more interesting the grids get for the handler, the more fun it is. You just got to get through the foundation stuff.
Yeah, it is. And it is tough. Like I wanted to move on. I just did what I was told and you've got to go through it. But I'm looking forward to now getting on with it a bit more and building up a bit more with Susie and getting back into it, Modi, when he's better. So yeah, I think it is just getting through that foundation bit and putting them. It's the same with everything. Foundations aren't the sexy stuff, are they? But you've got to put them in if you want to do the crazy fun stuff after and have a good understanding of it. Definitely.
Yeah, for
cool.
sure.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I think it's really been great. Hopefully people will have enjoyed it as much as I have. Yeah, I will put a link to you. Well, people must message you if they want to find out more.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kim.
That was fun. Thanks, Dave.
Cool. Thank you very much. See you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.